Hey, so humanistic therapy, right? Humanistic therapy is next. Humanistic therapy, well, this is based on humanistic psychology from the prologue way back at the beginning of this course. We mentioned humanistic psychology as one area of psychology that is not a scientific approach. So they value and believe, of course, that every individual can exercise his or her free will, and they believe in the innate value of every human being. And back in the personality chapter, we mentioned a humanistic view of personality, and we mentioned Carl Rogers. And at that time, I mentioned person-centered therapy or client-centered therapy. I believe the correct term nowadays is person-centered therapy. And the three components of that. And so that's used as an example, again here, of a humanistic therapy. The idea is that the client can cure him or herself, right? So you have those three things we mentioned back, I think even in the personality chapter. You want a genuine relationship between the therapist and the client, because they, Rogers thought most of the time you don't really get that anywhere else in your life. Someone you can be completely open and honest with, about every little detail of your life, and they'll be okay with that, right? So you're going to get that in therapy, right? Client-centered or person-centered therapy, which is a humanistic therapy. And then there's also the empathy. You want to have genuine empathy for the client as well. But then there's the all-important, if you remember it, unconditional positive regard, right? Unconditional positive regard. You value the client as a human being, period, no matter what they do. So you're valuing them as an individual no matter what. And that's enabling them to see that they can freely choose their own actions, and they don't have to behave the way others want them to behave, right? Because remember, that was conditional positive regard is what most people get. They learn that they only get that love and acceptance from others if they do certain things. But then they're surrendering their free will, so they're going to have problems. So get this unconditional positive regard in therapy and person-centered therapy, and they'll realize that they can exercise their free will, and that's a very important first step to getting better from a humanistic therapy point of view. The other kind of thing with humanistic therapy, well, person-centered therapy in particular, this example of humanistic therapy, is that you're not there as the therapist. You are not there to tell the client what to do, right? You do not tell the client what to do. You use this technique they call their active listening, right? Active listening. You listen to what the client says, phrase there, empathic listening, in which the listener echoes, restates, and clarifies, right? So, a client comes in. It's very odd to hear it, but the whole idea of this is, once again, the client can cure him or herself, right? And you don't help them by telling them what to do, because once again, you're taking away their free will. You want them to make the decisions. And it's just a completely different type of therapy in contrast with psychoanalysis, right? So this really was the first major therapeutic alternative to psychoanalysis, and Rogers just saw this as being completely different, right? In psychoanalysis, that's sometimes what might be called a directive therapy, psychoanalysis, where the therapist, or in that case the psychoanalyst, is in charge and making the decisions, decides what the client's problems are, what needs to be done about them, what the goals of therapy should be, right? The therapist is making all the decisions. Not here. Person-centered therapy might be called non-directive therapy. You want the client, right? The client needs to figure out what is the problem in his or her life, what we should do about it, what the goal of therapy should be. The client is making all these decisions. You are just there to sort of enable the client to exercise his or her free will and make these decisions. So you're just supporting that. So in active listening, the client comes in and says, oh my God, I had a test today that I forgot about. I did bad on it. I had a flat tire. And so the therapist just, so what I hear you saying is that you've had many unexpected events today happen today. I mean, you're just kind of rephrasing what the client said, and you're reflecting it back to the client. So that it's sort of like we get so flustered that we don't, we just think this and let it out, and we don't really think about it. So reflecting it back to the client enables them to think about it and exercise their free will. At least that's one of the things going on in active listening in person-centered therapy. But you're valuing the individual, right, as a human being, period, right? So you could have a terrible person, right, terrible person as a client, but they still have value as a human being. So you would endeavor what you could do to still value them. So they also mention here that humanistic therapy might also be considered an insight therapy, the same way psychoanalysis might have been considered an insight therapy, or psychodynamic therapy is considered an insight therapy. You still have to achieve some sort of insight into your own personal awareness, your own personal issues, kind of an insight into the fact that you can make your own decisions, you can choose to make your own life better. There are things you can do to start improving your life. And you have the power to do that. You have free will. You can exercise that free will and make things better. Now, it doesn't mean you can completely change your life overnight, but every day there are decisions for you to make, right? That you have the power to make as an individual. So it can be a really empowering, positive type therapy. There are things about it that I like because of that. But that's a little bit on humanistic therapy. I'll stop this video there.